to another episode of Song Title Challenge, where the question is, climbers, how would you write this one? And are you sure it's the right way to write it? This is the episode where climbers like you, listeners of this podcast, send in their song titles. You can send in as many as you want. Send them to info@daredevilproduction.com. And production is singular. There is no S. info@daredevilproduction.com. Put Song Title Challenge or STC in the subject line so it gets into the right folder. If you don't, it won't. I spring them live to Brent and a guest on the podcast here. And then we try to cook up 5 or 6 different angles and different concepts on how to write that lyric. And this is the kind of work that you should be doing. It's a 20-minute exercise. It's a creative exercise. It's going to help you, number one, bring much more interesting ideas to your songwrites. And number two, not for nothing, this is going to revive some old titles in your hook book, bring them to life, and maybe even get you a cut like Brent just got, being an artist, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One thing too, for some of you out there, like if you can send in as many titles as you want, I love it. If you send in a list of titles, awesome. If you come up with a couple more song ideas, titles, and you want to send those to me, don't resend those attached to the same list you sent before, because it just gets lost in my in my email. So if you want to send me 50 emails with one different song, that's fine. If you want to send in a list, that's fine. But just don't send me repeat titles. That's all I'm saying. Send in as many as you want. Just don't repeat anything. That's all. Okay. Do my email a favor and my ability to research for this so we can pick some out. So, by the way, it's a fun, creative exercise. This is not a co-write in any way, shape, or form. You take everything we say, take nothing we say. It's 100% your song. Just the only thing we require is that we're invited to the number one party.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's right. We like number one parties.
So today we've got a very special guest. We've got like a hit songwriter and somebody that I'm proud and grateful to call a friend. We got Mr. Steve O'Brien with us on the show. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Hey there. How you doing?
Great.
Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, Steve is multi-talented. I mean, aside from being an ex-porn star and changing...
Johnny, a Chippendale dancer.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Chippendale dancer. I knew that you made the needle move. I wasn't sure where you had the most impact.
That's what we're telling people. Like I knew a girl once that what did she? I can't remember what the deal was, but she worked at Hooters, but she said if you work at Deja Vu, you tell your parents you work at Hooters. If you're a hooker, you tell your parents you work at Deja Vu.
That's the nuance there. I love it.
Yeah.
So, just for our listeners out there, I mean, he's got a lot of compositions out there that you have heard. I think one of the biggest ones is Brooks and Dunn classic, which I believe was the number one, right? Rock My World, Little Country Girl.
Yeah. Number 2, actually, but
number 2. That is awesome. And also an author of a book called The Ferrari Club. For the record, Steve, I just want you to know I'm officially dropping my lawsuit. I don't like it when you put my life out into the world like that. It was just a little off-putting, but we agreed to drop the lawsuit.
That was before the sex change operation. You're an entirely different person now.
That's absolutely true. And I'll get back to you with the pro.
No one would know.
Is that from because you have a Ferrari or you're a little country girl that rocks someone's world? I'm not sure which part of that you're actually talking about, Johnny.
You're asking a lot of questions, Brent. A lot of questions.
Okay.
All right. Let's get right into this. So today's song title here is from Chris Tiscarino. That's a usual suspect. Doesn't she write a lot with
he?
Or Chris, I'm sorry, doesn't Chris write a lot with
Brad Hacker, Pat Adams? Yeah. That crew. Sunday Joe Graham. Yeah. So they've been in stuff like trying to think of what we've done on the show from them. I'm not sure. But anyway, yes.
So before I tell the title here, I'm going to just put my hot take in it. I'm not sure what the hell we're going to do with this title. I think it's extremely specific.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I do this hot take, Steve, on what I would say, and this is not a slam in any way, shape, or form, because it always comes out good, but like on the more mundane titles, right? Then at the end of the episode, it's always like, oh my God, I want to write this song. We really turned it around. So here is the title. The title is Practically Neighbors.
Practically neighbors.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, Practically Neighbors. Okay, here's one thing that pops into mind first, and Steve, feel free to just jump on it. We're just playing in the sandbox. Is something like, I'm not saying, was it like, I'm not saying I'm in this is hell, but I'm saying me and the devil are practically neighbors.
No.
Or maybe it's like a relationship thing. Like, she
might have heard of me.
I'm not saying she's a devil, but they're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's some way of saying, like, basically, like, kind of like, I'm not scared of the devil, I married his sister. Which is not exactly putting the woman on a pedestal, which may not be the best thing, but that's just kind of the first kind of jokey thing that I thought of. Practically neighbors. Like, Chris, next time I see you, let's see.
Hit him upside the head.
I know. Practically neighbors. Let's see what else.
Well, I'll just, that title doesn't, I mean, sometimes you hear something and it just immediately suggests something.
Right.
So that doesn't really do that off the bat, which is sort of cool because, it'd be a good opportunity to stretch the imagination. And I'll just tell you how I tend to work for what it's worth. My 2 cents or whatever is, a lot of times sitting down with people, if someone comes up with the title or I think of something myself, one of the first things I'll do is to just run a search on Spotify or something to see if there's another song with that title. And, if it was a giant hit last year for The Weeknd or something, or, I'd probably know it if it was, Blake Shelton or something, but if it was, The Weeknd's a major artist, but if it was a big hit within the last few years or something, that would be a negative. I'm not saying you wouldn't be able to write it, but the fact that I just did a search on this and there's no song called that is a big positive.
Yes.
So, when I think of some of my favorite songs historically, things like White Christmas or Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue or, things, there's only one White Christmas, there's only, but there's a lot of songs called I Love You or something, but so I'm not sure exactly where to go with that, but I would say you're starting off with at least one strong positive with that.
Yeah, I agree. That is a good point. It's like I don't want to invite comparison with my titles. I don't want them to go, oh, it's the same title that one song that I loved growing up. This is not as good as that because even if it's better, it's not as nostalgic for me. Oh, great. Okay.
Well, it just makes it easier to collect the money too. I mean, if there's only one song, it's going to be easier for BMI or ASCAP or CSAC, your PRO, to figure out what it is and things like that. So,
I think I've collected on songs that have, because I have a couple titles that, a little more, I'm sure there are others. Like, how did I get 3 cents from Holland on this song? Right. Well, it wasn't my song because I don't think it got cut, but that's 3 cents.
I just thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how songs have a life, though. I mean, they get out there in the ether there, and people hear them and record them, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
yet there are 3 number ones called Fire.
There we go.
That's
yep.
Example. Yeah.
So Practically Neighbors. I wonder if I also think of a little bit of a kumbaya thing, where like universally speaking, us in Afghanistan, we're practically neighbors.
Oh,
right.
That could be a thing too of, which could go into many genres like folky, adult contemporary. There are many genres that you could probably fit that kind of idea into, but going, the world's not really that big. Even people around the world, we're practically neighbors. Like if you look at it you get far enough away, you get on the moon, the Earth looks pretty small.
Right.
And we're practically neighbors. There's David Wilcox has a song called There Is No Far Away. There's no far away.
Right.
It's the world is getting smaller. So that could be a thing, just more of a deeper, meaningful, global responsibility or global family of humanity kind of song.
Right. I just listened to a podcast with a civilian scientist astronaut, Jessica Meir, who just was up at the space station for, I think, 6 months or whatever. And they were talking about that very thing. Like they call it I think it's the overview complex or the overview syndrome, where you just, for 6 months, you spend looking down at the world and you come back with a completely different perspective.
Yeah. Like all those borders and stuff, you can't see that from space.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's not drawn. It's not etched into the earth. You can't really tell by looking at it.
Oh, so you just touched on something right there, like borders. I mean, what makes borders, if we're practically neighbors, like maybe there's something about borders, like a fence between us or something like that you could come up with.
Yeah. And I think too, like playing off the word, practical, almost like practical neighbors, practically. It's like, there's a way to like, I don't know, like, the offenses because we're practically neighbors or something. I'm not sure how to twist that. And that practically is just an unusual word.
I got something. So Def Leppard kind of did this with Rocket, the song Rocket.
Okay.
Which is like this big shout out to all these different major artists. What do you do with neighbors, right? You borrow a cup of sugar, you borrow a stick of butter, you look after each other's houses or whatever. Well, what if the song is like an homage to the heroes of whatever genre that would be in, right? Like, let's say in country music, you might be naming off Waylon and Willie and all these artists that, Brooks and Dunn, all these artists that came before you, and you're borrowing something from them to make your style. And hey, you know what? It's all good. We're practically neighbors.
Yeah. Kind of a meta commentary.
It sort of implies that when you say we're practically neighbors, there's something implied there that preceding that, though, even though we may be sort of far apart, we're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
Is that sort of true, you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. I feel that. I also feel a little bit of an ask is inherent in there. Like, come on, man, we're practically neighbors. Kind of like Johnny was saying about borrow a cup of sugar. Come on, we're practically neighbors. Right. So it could be in the context of an ask or just saying, hey, I'm so close to this person. We're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
Or they're just not that far. Like they're not that far away, but they're close enough that we're basically neighbors. Yeah. I think is probably the general use of that term is like, well, they're down the street, but we're practically neighbors. Or, hey, do you know so-and-so? Oh yeah, he's just like a mile down the road. We're practically neighbors. Like maybe because we know each other. We don't live literally next door, but we're close. So I wonder if there's something there. I think of, we do the big kumbaya thing, which is like big and deep and meaningful and brothers, hood of man kind of thing. But can you also turn it into just like a bar pickup line,
Right.
Oh, girl, you're from LA. I'm from Tennessee. Shoot, it's fine. We're practically neighbors.
Yeah, there you go. Like a swagger song.
That.
I've been to LA or whatever. I've been there a bunch. Or we're practically neighbors. Or shoot, that's only 2,000 miles, girl. We're practically neighbors. I'll come over, borrow a cup of sugar.
Yeah. Right. Give me some sugar. I'd like to borrow a cup or maybe even more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, So sometimes if it gets to this point, I also think about, that has a nice ring to it, the sound of it. So what are some other words that might follow from that would give us a clue to be where to go? I mean, like we're practically neighbors, actually something.
Practically, factually, naturally.
Actually, factually. And then I was just looking up trying to think of some rhymes, but there's not there's got to be some there, but like labor or so. Let me see what.
Yeah, or like we're practically neighbors, so naturally favors are gonna happen.
Yeah,
that kind of thing, of kind of playing on that. So
what up, Eminem?
B&B.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Favor and neighbor. That goes to the bar pickup story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if I could ask you a favor since we're practically neighbors. And you're just looking for the digits, right?
Just a little favor. After all, we're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
You live on Earth. So do I.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I keep all my stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you from? I'm from so and so. That's on Earth, right? Yeah, dude. So am I.
Yeah, great.
What luck?
Yes, I think what you're saying there, Brent, that would be the direction that would be probably the most fun thing that you could write that might have the most radio appeal. Like I could hear a sort of a Chris Janson type, some of his fun stuff. Brad Paisley or more Chris Janson maybe, but that direction sort of
a wink and a smile.
Set it up starting in a bar and then, winding up with, could I borrow a cup of sugar or, something just for tonight, or something.
Yeah.
That's okay. Now we're going rock and roll here. This could be like a rock song, a road song.
Yeah.
Right.
Since we're practically neighbors, can I borrow a cup of your sugar?
Oh yeah.
Let's hook up, like just for tonight.
Yeah. And that's not, that's not even a sideways rhyme, but it sort of could work, We're practically neighbors. Can, I borrow a cup of sugar or, I guess.
Just a little favor. What's a little favor between practically neighbors?
Ask you a favor, could I borrow?
What if you do? Yeah. Like what's a little favor, between practically neighbors, like we're, and the rock thing too is like, we're an American band. We're coming to your town. We're practically neighbors with everybody. Why? Cause we're everywhere. Right. We're always coming to town. You mentioned like
I had a neighbor with a daughter had a favor, so I gave her just a little kiss. I like this.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned the Chris Janson thing, and that gets me thinking of almost like a good directions kind of thing, where it's like I had to see you. Oh, it was just 10 miles down the dirt road, left over the creek, over the hill, through the ridge, and all this stuff. It's like, and I just thought I'd just come over. After all, we're practically neighbors. Like this guy goes through all this, stuff to get to this girl, and he's like, just want to borrow some, maybe a cup of sugar. Yeah, we're practically neighbors. But like the course or whatever, kind of like good directions.
Right.
You take a left at the caution light, and blah blah blah, and all this stuff, and like, or maybe he's asking her to come over. Like, yeah, let's go over to my place. Well, it's not far. We're practically neighbors. If there's a way to do that, which could be kind of funny and ironic.
Yeah. I like that a lot. It's like he could invite her. Would you like to come over for breakfast tomorrow morning? And would you like to have breakfast with me tomorrow morning? Well, yeah, that means you got to come over tonight first. But I mean, something, borrow the cup of sugar. I don't know.
Yeah, or like he's showing up at her place, but like it turned out he really came from a long way away. But he's like, oh, it's no problem. We're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
It's like, but just showing how badly he wants that girl and just making no big deal out of it.
And for that, to add to that, it's not only like how far he has to go. That's one verse. The other verse is like everything he's willing to do for her, right? Yeah. Like you can borrow my lawnmower. You can, I'll look after your dog. Like all those things that neighbors do. You could go down that list and like, baby, I'm going to we're practically neighbors.
Yeah, you
like,
pet my dog.
Things I want to do for you.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, yeah.
You pet my dog, I'll mow your lawn. We're practically neighbors, baby. Now I feel like it's definitely going to a more rock and roll. But anyway, in a weird way. So a lot of double entendre there.
What about like a small town thing? Kind of like a small town unity thing. Like, hey, he might live we're all from the same town. They might live on the other side of town, but we're practically neighbors, and kind of a unity thing, small town love thing.
Yeah, because they may be 5 miles away, but they're they are the next door over. If you live way out,
it could be along those lines, like something. We're practically neighbors with a few minor exceptions. The fact that we're 2,000 miles away, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what all.
That's cool.
I like that. Where that would go. Sometimes I think. I remember Harlan Howard. I know you guys are familiar with Harlan Howard. He's not with us anymore, but he wrote those classic songs like I Fall to Pieces and everything. Yeah. But he said there's only 4 songs that have ever been written. And there were the themes for 4 songs. And one of is I Want to Screw You. Number 2 is You're Screwing. We Are Screwing. Number 3 is You're Screwing Someone Else. And number 4 is Screw You.
Those are the 4 pillars.
Yeah. Those are the 4 pillars of songwriting, so it's like what in literature they say there's only 7 great plots. Like, there's the Jesus story, or there's this or that. So
the hero's journey.
In the first one maybe, but if it was if it was one of those other directions, we're practically neighbors. How could you do this to me or something? I don't know.
Yeah, like
that's not as good as either the thing you guys are talking about, though.
No, well, we just throw them out there, and then we just, it's just we throw that against. Our job is not to decide whether it sticks; it's just to throw the spaghetti against the wall.
Sure. Exactly. Let the listeners figure out where they want to run with it.
Right.
And we give our thought, but it is good to give our thoughts. Like, well, I think this would work for country because of this. Like some of the fun stuff, like say the Chris Janson kind of vibe of revealing he drove all that way over, because maybe she mentioned she wish she had a something, right? Like, oh, da-da-da. And he shows up like 2 hours later with that, the milk and the eggs or something. I just ran over. We're practically neighbors, mentioned on the phone. Maybe they're getting to know each other. And, she mentioned blah, blah, blah. She could, didn't have something, whatever. And he just shows up. He's like, that's cool, girl. We're practically neighbors. All I had to do is, then there's this long, there's a course of like all the directions of, how he got there or whatever.
All the things he had to do.
Just a little favor. What's a little favor? We're practically neighbors.
Restraining order.
Pardon me?
What rhymes with restraining order?
Right. That's why I'm thinking like they were talking on the phone. There's a little.
That could be the first too.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. They're on the phone. There's a little bit of a relationship there. They're already flirting. They're feeling each other out, and so it comes across more sweet than like stalkerish. Hopefully, you do have to account for that
with restraining order.
Another thing I think is I know you guys have found this, but sometimes you work on a song, you think you're doing what we're doing now. You're trying to make it work, but then sometimes the song gets started and it starts telling you what to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
For sure.
And you've created something that's sort of bigger than all of you, and it has its own existence, and it starts. So sometimes I look at the title, and the word practically also implies the word practical, and I don't have any idea of how that would be applied to a romance or to this song even, but in a practical way, like what would that mean, or something? I don't think there's anywhere to go with that, but
maybe you do things that aren't practical when you're practically neighbors. Like you go the extra mile for your neighbor, right? We're practically neighbors, so we do things that aren't quite practical, like for stranger that you wouldn't do with a stranger. Neighbor and stranger might be kind of a little cockeyed rhyme.
Stranger's good, yeah.
It's like
there you go. So that might be
practically neighbors. Don't be a stranger, or something.
Yeah, it's like you do things that you wouldn't do for a favor you wouldn't do for a stranger. You get impractical a little bit, because people you're close to, people you're around. Right. I'm not going to go drive 50 miles to go mow a stranger's yard, but if somebody close to me, right down the street, or somebody that I have a relationship with, we're practically neighbors. Yeah, I may send my son to go mow his yard,
right?
Which normally is like impractical, but you do those things for the people you love and your community and that sort of thing. So that could be a kind of like Johnny was talking about, the small town, the kumbaya kind of thing. It could be that sort of thing too. Like it ain't all about being practical when you're practically neighbors.
Right.
There you go. That's cool. Two good angles right there. It might not be practical, but we're practically neighbors, and we're practically neighbors. Don't be a stranger. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that angle too, because that's kind of like a whole dip. Like maybe it's somebody new that comes into the community.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like Mama's House, right?
Yeah.
Mama's House from Tim McGraw. It's that kind of an angle, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Come on in and. How you doing? Did you get something to eat? Just talking about Southern hospitality. Mm-hmm. It could be a song about Southern hospitality. Like we're practically neighbors. Don't be a stranger.
Right. And that could also tie in with just your initial thought of, I guess there's already been that song From a Distance, but, just the idea of even though we may be apart, geographically, when you look at it from afar, we're really, it may be a few thousand miles, but it's an inch on a map,
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about From a Distance. Yeah. Was that Bette Midler?
I think so. Yeah.
From a Distance, God is watching us, From a Distance. But that concept is definitely, that was a big old hit and a valuable concept.
It was probably hit before most of the listening audiences was born,
Right.
So
yeah,
so,
I'm remembering this song from a distance.
The emotion is valid.
The emotion, the takeaway for the listener, the value prop of the song is
right.
definitely still valid, and even more so probably these days. But Practically Neighbors, I think of like a bluegrass or country. It feels like could lend itself to a bluegrass, a country, more rural kind of presentation of similar idea.
Right.
I'm talking about, you look at a map, if you look from space, you don't see the lines on the map. And there are ways to talk about that. Like, we're practically neighbors, and we should treat each other that way.
Yeah.
You got to worry about being preachy or whatever. So maybe you tell the story about, I moved to this small town from a long way away, but where I was visiting, the people there were so nice because they're like, oh, shoot, we're practically neighbors. It's on the same planet, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it got me thinking about, boy, wouldn't the world be better if everybody's looked at people all around the world were like, dang, aren't we practically neighbors? We're on the same planet. We keep all our stuff here.
Yeah.
Why we act like we're strangers? We're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
So that may be a way to kind of ground it, depending on your genre, for more of a country thing, a bluegrass thing, or whatever, to just kind of you telling the story.
Well,
you're not really preaching.
You're right.
Brent.
You write that correctly, and that could be such a timely song right now.
Yeah, and probably always will be, unfortunately. But yeah,
and I like what you're saying a lot. I knew Harlan Howard a long time ago, many years ago, a little bit. But I remember one time I mentioned some song idea I had to him, and he said, "That's a really clever idea." He said, "But that's the hardest song to write." And I said, "Really? I like funny or just clever songs that have a twist to them." And he said, "Yeah, but it'll get people's attention. But the audience that loves music, they relate to things emotionally." Mm-hmm. So he said the hardest thing with a clever song is to give it enough heart,
yes, so
that it does get people's attention, but it's resonating with something they really feel deep inside them. Mm-hmm. Because if that's not happening, it limits what the song can do. So
yeah.
So, but what you're saying is, as you said, you used the word grounded. I think, Johnny, is that gives the song some grounding, and it could have clever stuff in there about the cup of sugar. It could even meeting someone at a bar or something like that. It could be a girl. It could just be some guy or something you're talking to. But I would think, that I would sort of end up leaning a little bit sort of in that direction, maybe.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool. You don't want someone to hear your song, like the head versus heart thing. And I've heard plenty of songs where you're like, that's an interesting concept, but it doesn't connect emotionally. It's almost more of a thought experiment. And I've written certainly plenty of those too, and they've not gone anywhere. But it's like, you don't want someone to hear your song and go, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. It's like, oh man. I mean, it's not bad for a song to make somebody think, to be thought provoking, right, but to only be like a heady, like, yeah, that's interesting. Okay. And moving on with my life. Because it doesn't get further south than their neck, So
that's right. Well, I think we got some good looks at that, fellas.
Yeah.
I really do. So Brent, if Chris wanted to write this with you, like, and I'll extend the same question to our guest here, Steve O'Brien. Like, if this guy wanted to write this with you, how would they do that?
You're right. So I do songwriter coaching, consulting, coach writing, all that good stuff. You can see my calendar, you can get all the details, and you can book a session at songwritingpro.com/coaching. That's songwritingpro.com/coaching. I do Q&A. I do, help you prepare your song, help you repair your song, all that good stuff. We can reach out to Steve if that is something you want to make happen, and we'll see. No promises ever, Steve. We're not obligated to anything.
Yeah, just let me know. The best way to write to me is to get a record deal and have Clive Davis send me a note with your.
I thought you kicked Clive out of your house that last time.
That has never not worked for me.
The last time the thing happened with the donkey and the Tijuana hooker, I thought you and Clive split up over that. You forgave him?
Well, it was a question about who was a donkey, I guess. So.
All right, guys. Well, hey, Steve O'Brien, thank you so much, man.
It's so much fun, guys.
Yeah,
I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, it's super fun. Right. Steve's available for production, by the way. Info at SteveO'BrienMusic.com. And O'Brien is Obrien.
Mm-hmm. SteveO'BrienMusic.com.
SteveO'BrienMusic.com if you want to connect with him for any production needs, co-writes, or anything like that.
Interested in talking to people, so
let him know. And if you want some good Clive Davis and donkey stories, he's your man. All right.
And let's see, the Ferrari Club is your
the Ferrari Club is a book available on Amazon.
Yeah,
that's right. There you go. Yes.
People, when I first came in, when I had been in Nashville for a while and had a little success writing songs, people would say, well, you grew up in Connecticut. How did you, in the Northeast, how did you ever become a Nashville songwriter? And I said, after a few beers one night, I just made this up. But I said, well, actually, I was in graduate school at NYU in New York City and working part-time in this pizza restaurant. And I saw a mafia shooting there and was witness to that. So the FBI put me in the witness protection program as a Nashville songwriter.
Make sure no one ever heard from you again.
Yeah.
Right.
So then, the guy comes to Nashville and he meets up with this producer who's got a bunch of friends with Ferraris. And it's a funny story, and the mafia never is far away. It's always haunting him through the book, but but through it, there's a lot of stories about, details about how the music business works, just what it's like to be in a recording studio or how record deals work and publishing. And as this guy gradually becomes successful under the wings of this Ferrari guy and still trying to escape the mafia. But
that sounds fun.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Steve. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much. This has been a blast. Anytime.
We'll let you know when this thing drops, buddy. Hey,
all right. And Brent, I'd love to stay in touch about anything.
Oh, yes, sir.
All right,
yes,
man.
Sir.
All right. Y'all take care. Have a great weekend.
This podcast exists because we want you to win.
So keep on climbing, and we'll see you at the top.